Welcome to the Florence Studio. I'm Laura Thompson, founder of the Florence Studio here in Italy. And as promised, today's quick lesson is on values. But I'm using all new equipment and I've become the student again myself with the new technology. So fingers crossed that this works well, but we'll see. We're muddling through and hopefully we'll get better with each one of these. Wish my son was here to help, but we'll manage. So let's get started. By value, we simply mean how light or how dark. Value is what I consider to be the second most important principle in some paintings. And I'll hint at what I mean by some paintings later, because there are some exceptions to this. But after the correct drawing and proportions, value is important, as it often describes the form in 3D, and it creates a feeling of volume and the space occupied, and it explains the direction of the light source. Now, as you can see in this image, we use a value scale to show a value range from the lightest lights, white, to the very darkest darks, black, and all the mid values in between the two. Now, when we start to fill in value, it's often easiest to start with the darkest darks to establish what we call a key. And by that, we mean that we've established our darkest value, and therefore, everything after that value has to be relative to it. Learning to see value, though, can be tricky because quite often our mind and our eye will confuse what we see. And so to demonstrate, I like to use this example in class with my students. It's a bit of a fun trick, but I want you to look at the center bar, and I'm going to ask you which side of the center bar appears to be lightest in value. Now, if you said the left, you're in good company, but in fact, it's not true. The bar is actually the exact same value all the way across. It's the same, but it appears lighter when it's surrounded by dark, and it appears darker when it's surrounded with the light background. So this is known as relative value or relative contrast. Our perception when looking at an object to paint is affected by its surroundings, which is why we often squint our eyes. Now, squinting will give you wrinkles like I have on your forehead, but it really works to separate the values and to more clearly see where the darks end and the lights begin. Now, I say value is important to describing form because you can see in these images of the girl with the pearl earring by Vermeer that if we take away all the color, we still know who she is. In sepia tone, without any color, we still understand it's a girl with a scarf, that she's facing the light, that one side of her face is in shadow. Now, the color is lovely, and it certainly contributes to our viewing experience. But it was, in this case, a little bit more decorative than essential in our understanding of what or who we're seeing. So in this image, you can see we have an orange. In orange, we have a light that is coming from above, a light source. That light source is creating a light side to the sphere in this image, which includes the main form light or body light. And where it hits the most directly, it's creating a highlight or our very lightest light. Now, you can see how important, though, it is to not use up your lightest light, white, too fast, because had we used white to paint the earring, we would have had nothing left to put the highlight on. Even though we know it's a white earring, it must be dark enough to support the brightest highlight to really make it shine. Now, let's move to the shadow side of the sphere. Now, this large half of the sphere in shadow is known as the body or the form shadow. It's where the light side meets the dark side that we call the terminator line, the decisive moment where the shadow side truly begins. This is also sometimes referred to as the bedbug line, because bedbugs are notorious for hiding in the darkest places of the sheets away from the light. So the terminator or the bedbug line. Now, in the beginning stage of a drawing or a painting, where we're looking for values, this is the line that we look for first. And this is where squinting really will help. Now, in our longer video, and a link, yes, will be included in the description box somewhere if you're viewing this on YouTube, we'll go into more depth on all of these terms. But I just want to take a quick moment now, though, to describe the reflected light. The reflected light is the light that is bouncing from the table surface back onto the sphere. But watch, it's contained within the dark shadow side. So it's important to think back to that trick that I showed you earlier with the bar on the light and the dark background. Let's not be fooled into thinking that this is lighter in value than it really is. It's being seen within a dark shape. And so the perception of it being lighter appears exaggerated. In reality, it's nowhere near as light as even the midlights on the light side. And you can see that I've taken pieces, I've cut a piece of each of the values and placed them off to the side. And the reflected light is actually surprisingly quite dark. Now, in composition, we can affect where the viewer looks first and longest. In this example by Vermeer, we're reminded again that the earring had to be darker than white to support the bright highlight. But let's also look at the letter in the center of the painting and see how, in contrast to the dark clothing, it really draws our eye. Here, it's not just described form, but it's also compositionally directed and decided where we look, where we want to look. Now, the same technique was used by Rembrandt in this portrait. You can see the white ruffled collar directs us to hold our attention longer and near the face, which is the area where we want, or Rembrandt rather, wanted the viewer to focus the most. So let's remember this trick. If we need to make something look lighter or brighter, it's not always best to just add white and lighten the value. Often, it is better to make something beside the area we want brighter, darker. Now, this will increase the contrast, and it will create the illusion of the light area appearing to be brighter and more intense in contrast to that darker area. Chiaroscuro. Many of you may already be familiar with the term chiaroscuro. It's an Italian term meaning quite literally, in translation, light and shadow. Chiaro is the Italian for light. Scuro is the Italian for dark or shadow. Paintings that rely on this effect, a chiaroscuro effect, have large areas of very dark darks and contrasting areas of very light lights. Caravaggio. Caravaggio is perhaps best known for this technique, the one that we're most familiar with, and you can see it has a theatrical, almost dramatic light effect. Whereas many of the Impressionists used more color contrast, a little less emphasis on value, more emphasis on complementary color contrast, to be precise. But color contrast, that's a lesson for another day. And I received some wonderful high-res images, photos that my friend and artist Carolyn took at a recent exhibition in France. And she sent them to me yesterday morning. And I think I'm going to use some of those in our next segment. So that's something to look forward to. But in the meantime, happy painting, everyone.